Thanks. So I should say welcome, like it was a completely new event, and thanks first of all for the organizers of JanusCon. This is a very nice opportunity, and we got the space for keeping this idea, which we were been talking about for the last years. And I'm afraid there isn't a real beach this time that we are on, but probably we will have in some other edition. And just a couple of words to explain what we would like to do this for the rest of the day. So in terms of highlighting what we saw for the first 2 days in JanusCon, I think a very good reception from the community and the interactivity. The presence and the interaction has been great. And probably some of the topics that are more VoIP focused are around the future of PSTN. We would like to see it going, but it's probably going to stay for some more. And it's something that in terms of VoIP community, we should probably discuss. Containers are commonplace. I don't think there is any doubt that are suitable for production. Most of the production systems use them, and so they are a reality, and we can probably discuss what we should do as a community for the future, and possibly the Open VoIP Alliance involvement in what we are trying to achieve as a community could be an interesting new point. So in VoIP on the Beach, we would like to see the current status of the VoIP industry, not as a specific project, but more as a community, and see how we can propose innovation in which areas, what we can do together, and if there's the opportunity for group discussions that can each one lead to some topics and actively working on them. So some topics that we had in mind at the beginning, but then I'll show you the list that you also are proposing, is how VoIP changes. VoIP solutions change given the modern infrastructures, and Federico's presentation will be focused mostly on that. How WebRTC is dragging VoIP, is changing it, and how we need to integrate with other services, and what will be the role of HTTP in the future in VoIP, probably much more than we saw so far. And other subtopics like authentication and identity, which is still open, and security and opportunity for standardizations, or for getting rid of some standardizations to be more free to innovate, as Iñaki was suggesting yesterday. So as a secondary goals, if we define these areas where we want to move and discussion groups, perhaps we can bring forward some ideas together and lead to innovation by this sort of community involvement, by which also we could have reports on the activity, also in particular the activities that we are going to do in the afternoon. Also, I think important is that this is an event in Italy, in particular southern Italy. Probably is not so evident for anybody from Europe or the US that in Italy these events are not so common, and Miteco gave a good example of organization and community involvement, and we would like to see it happening more often in the RTC community and having the Italy more involved as a secondary goal. And if possible, if this is successful and possibly with some changes, making VoIP on the Beach this format specifically for interaction, something that we can bring into other conferences or other events as a standalone or together with other events. And also, if possible, meeting in exotic places. Napoli is an example, and we can bring other examples as well. Federico and I are from Sardinia, so that's exotic enough, I guess. And we can also go to Sweden in summer.
We're exotic in February.
Yes. And so, by the way, during the day, these days, we asked you to propose some some topics. So please continue. We will share it with Twitter. There is a list. Continue to edit and propose yours. The idea is that when at 4:30 the presentations finish, we can identify 2 or maximum 3 topics and divide the audience and have some small groups of discussion. Focus on those topics that we decide, and then the moderators will eventually will generate a small report, and we will talk about it in the following days, and we'll see how we can go from there. So I don't want to take more time from Federico's presentation, and if you have questions, please just ask. Thank you. There you go.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Federico Cabiddu. Just quickly who I am. I work in VoIP since 2001. Started with a H323. If someone has the the lucky to work with it. I'm a VoIP RTC. I'm a VoIP RTC passionate. I'm currently the Libon voice tech team tech coordinator. So Libon is formerly was a Orange project, the French operator. I'm a Camelio developer and a SIP capture team member. So just quickly, what we are going to view in this presentation is just quickly a brief introduction on infrastructure evolution. What are the impacts on VoIP, and possibly short-term and long-term approach to the problem. Disclaimer: I won't give any answer in this presentation. I'm going to ask questions to you, just following what Giacomo said to encourage the discussion at the end of the presentations. So as I said, this is how it used to be for VoIP guys, the infrastructure until now. So an on-premise data center with its own firewall, its a rack of servers, some equipment to connect to the PSTN. And this is how mostly we would like to be today. So the cloud provider, possibly split in several regions, maybe with a Kubernetes or some other kind of orchestration for our applications. But as you can see from the previous slide, the 2 extremes of the equation doesn't change. Doesn't change. We will have on one side people willing to make calls, and on the other side still the PSTN. As Giacomo said, we don't think it's going to disappear so soon. So basically, why the cloud? The first answer is because customers simply expect it today. I work as a consultant, and nowadays it's basically almost a basic requirement when a new customer wants to deploy a new service. It expects that it run on the cloud. On the other hand, also, if you are running a service platform as a service, somehow it gives more confidence to the customers if you are deploying on their same cloud infrastructure. It's that way. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's that way today. Then, for sure, there are also advantages. We cannot negate going the cloud. Easier scalability, for sure. A consistency in the deployment. For sure, a smaller upfront investment, which is really important today for a small business starting. You don't have to have a data center with buying all the equipment in advance, and also having people taking care of the infrastructure. So whether the cloud solution is a permanent solution for an enterprise, or just a starting point for an enterprise to then move to an on-premise solution, it's something that has to be taken in account. We can have faster provisioning, also easier geographic distribution, also for the same problem. If you want to have a service geo-distributing all over the world, and you are a small service, opening a data center in each interesting region, it's something that can be too much for a small business, small starting business. Also, we have the cloud platform offers off-the-shelf advanced tools like HTTP load balancers, HA, DNS management, network load balancers, etc. And lately, new tools, new also amazing tools like Istio. I don't know how many of you use Kubernetes and know Istio. Yeah, Istio basically is a traffic mesh component built that you deploy on Kubernetes, and it's able to direct and split your traffic. So implementing really nice thing for example, canary deployment, AMB blue and green deployment, or testing your solution on a small subset of users, things like this. And luckily, it doesn't work for VoIP. So generally speaking, and not only for VoIP, what are the challenges that come with the cloud? First, you have usually provider-specific tools to learn. And this is somehow a cost, because first, moving to a cloud so requires somehow an upfront investment that is the redesign of your architecture or part of your solution. Also, at the beginning, choosing the provider is a big task, and taking the decision at the right moment is important, because you could be it's not something, it's not easy to change your mind once you've started, because it can be hard to migrate from one provider to another. Another issue, that resources are not always dedicated. You can have dedicated resources at their cost, and they have their cost. And also, there's no standard solution for providers interconnection. Sometimes you cannot find everything that you want in a single provider, and for several reasons. And yeah, there's no standard solution for interconnecting different service provider. In VoIP, then, we have some other specific problems. The first one is that probably the IP addresses are ephemeral. So this is the biggest impact in VoIP for sure. Everything is NATed, basically, and this is also something that we know not too good for VoIP. Also, there are no VoIP specific components available. So we have HTTP load balancers, but we don't have a SIP load balancer that we can deploy. Everyone nowadays is deploying its own solution, homemade. Somehow we'll see then. Also, network. Not only we lose the control, the deep control on the network. That is for us is something can be a strong limitation. But the cloud provider also often or always the network is measured in terms of bandwidth and not in terms of packet rate, which is really what interests us more than the bandwidth. Also, another question: what happens when you are on a shared resource and you have some activity that require higher computation, like transcoding, mixing, etc. Okay. And then instances or containers are intrinsically ephemeral. So first, active calls, logs, traces. You need a different approach from what we knew until now. So, because most of the VoIP application have been designed to run as Linux daemons, accessing the network interfaces, etc. But this has changed because when we started running from going through passing from the metal to virtual machine, and now virtual machine in the clouds and containers. So what changes in design and administration? Just this is a just brief history of just a couple of points of the infrastructure evolution. So the first VMware server release was in 2001. In 2004, we had the first AWS public launch. In 2006, other cloud platform appeared. Docker in 2013, and in 2015 we had Kubernetes. And VoIP is somehow old because all the RFC date from the pre-cloud, pre-virtualization era. This is a nice resume of someone, I guess you know. So we have the RTP RFC is 23 years old, the SIP 20. The newest one is are the WebRTC specification that are 4 years ago, more or less. The big problem is that VoIP sessions are sticky. So while HTTP has a request response model, VoIP requires some sort of state, and yeah, you know very well what comes from this. That this is a big challenge for platforms that really are designed and taught to scale up and down continuously. So while state can be minimized, so what is the right balance that you can achieve between immutability and volatility? As I said, the biggest issue is that IP addresses are ephemeral, and this has an impact on, for sure, on scaling up and down. Generally speaking, in cloud, internal routing for sure benefits of using DNS, SRV record. That is something good that SIP has since long time, but I have to see not really used until now. But then, yeah, DNS must be fast and flexible at this point with short TTLs and things like this. But there is no easy and general solution for RTP. I mean, if you cannot simply bring down an instance that was managing RTP streams, you cannot. And in the cloud, it's for the same reason that IP addresses are ephemeral. It's not so easy to recover sessions or things that you could. For example, I'm thinking about the RTP engine that has a nice module, a nice way of recovering session from Redis. But then, since your IP addresses are ephemeral, this makes no sense. As I said, also, we have a lack of native component. There is no native SIP inbound load balancer for the cloud. Network load balancers can be used as a partial solution, just a partial solution, and in my experience, works better when you use TLS. Everything works better when you use TLS. And there is no easy solution for example, source NAT, outbound source NAT and balancing, and this is a common problem. Still, yeah, we are in 2019, but still, the main authentication method used by provider is by IP addresses. Not even other form of authentication, IP addresses. Yeah, and so I've seen doing weird thing and then not really clean thing to obtain this outbound source nothing. Also, yeah, high bandwidth that it was advertised, that is what is advertised by basically all the cloud provider is not enough for us, not at all. What we are really interested in is the packet rate, the packet and knowing when your network is saturating or near to saturation. Also, there is no official uh, there are no official cipher given by the provider about those limitations, but there are. There are. And by the way, do you know the packet rate limit of your infrastructure? This is a provocative. Okay. Yeah, it's something that we don't think about until we face the problem usually. And so, yeah, current cloud have no idea and give no clue about the RTC QoS. So there is no specific stat on RTP, but also basically on basic packet rate that your network is seeing. Again, there is you have no control over the network, and this is kind of a problem. And you need to build your own tools. Yeah, for example, with Omer. Just as an example, think about the WebRTC internals that you can get in Chrome. Wouldn't it be nice to have something like this from the cloud provider? Also, debugging change because first enabling the bug, if you stick to the Docker principles, mean that you have to deploy a new container. So you are at the same time changing what you want to observe. And traditional tools are less easy to use, are still enough useful, and it's really hard capturing on a container. Also because usually to do this, you go a little bit against container philosophy, adding on the container internally tools to be able to capture and then capture from outside. No, not really elegant, let's say. Even if, for example, there are some nice plugins for Kubernetes, like I don't know how many of you use Kubernetes and know ksniff. Okay, no one. It's a nice tool that allows you to capture on a remote container. Have a look if you use Kubernetes. So, is it still possible to troubleshoot live? Yes, somehow yes, but it's really not easy nor practical, I have to say. And this is one of the questions I want to pose. Should, in this case, debugging tool be part of the cloud offer, like other tools for debugging, usually HTTP, because cloud was born for HTTP, are offered as part of the cloud solution? I personally think yes. Then, as I said, also the cloud interconnection is sometimes something that you need, because you cannot find maybe all the pieces that you need on a single cloud provider, or maybe also for commercial reason, or because you have two divisions in your company, and like it happened, one decided to use one solution and the other one decided to use another solution, and at a certain point you need something one from the other, and there's no standard way of interconnecting cloud, and this can be really expensive when it's available. So another question: what people are usually doing today? Using VPNs, special agreement, TLS over public? I would like to to have your feedback on this, because as part of the discussion that we would like to have after. Another thing, SLA. How can you define and have SLA with your customer if you don't control your SLO? Do you know, how many of you know the difference between SLI, SLO, and SLA? Yeah, I knew that you know. So basically, SLI are the indicators, so the metrics that you choose to measure the performance of your system. The O are the objective. So what are your target objective for your system? And the A are just the O with the lawyers. And so how can you define your objective and then have something formalized for the customer with an A if we cannot control everything? From my point of view, this poses a big problem. For the cloud today, we can have a lot of workaround. Personally, put in place a lot of them. I'm not really proud always. Like manual allocation of static IPs, dedicated node to handle media, nodes that can never scale up and down, nodes where you use host network, which limit the number of containers that you can run, unless you use other workaround to spin up more instances of the same service in the same node. Keep alive when you want to have for example a service redundant in two different availability zones, you cannot use any more VRRP. So the traditional way to do keep alive is not existing anymore. You are forced to use level 3 keep alive, and it's not the same reaction time, you know. And then the lot of drain script, to drain the instance before being able to gracefully shut down. So at the end, it has changed not too much from the on-premise architecture in this case. The future, there are currently quite interesting discussions, and I hope we can be part of, about quick HTTP3 and the last one, RIP. How many of you have heard about RIP? Okay, so for the others, a new protocol specifically taught for the trunking connection, proposed by Rosenberg and Anthony Minesel. I never know how to pronounce the free switch guy. It has really interesting concept at the base, using quick HTTP3 as a basic protocol. It's still a draft. Again, it has interesting ideas. I suggest you to have a look, because we have to think about the future. Because the reality is, anyway, that SIP and RTP are going to stay there for a long time. Maybe forever. Why? I don't know. That's part of the discussion. As I said, I won't give any answer. I'm just going to ask questions. Also because at the same time, WebRTC has lowered the barrier to enter in the RTC. So, at the contrary of what we could think, there's even more need than interconnection to the PSTN. Because if SIP is not going to disappear for a certain amount of time, PSTN even less. It will stay there for a long, long time. This for sure. So these are my questions for the long term. First, how can we design VoIP network given what we have today to get the most of this new infrastructure? Then, should we as a community promote and develop some standard component like VoIP, a VoIP elastic load balancer for AWS or any other cloud provider, just an example in this case, or for example a VoIP ingress for Kubernetes? And if yes, how can we organize ourselves in working groups to have the most benefit and not having each one working on its own island and then going to present what it did? And do we have best practices for the cloud? Is there any shared place where we can share this information and benefit everyone? I guess that Ruben and Open VoIP Alliance are giving a good answer. I was very glad to see this initiative. And another question, how we can avoid vendor lock-in and making our infrastructure the most agnostic as possible regard of the actual cloud provider that we are using? And last question, do we need to think to design new protocol like RIP, but maybe something on the client side? Lately, it looks like the common tendency is to think that the client part will be, each one will do its own custom protocol. I don't like very much this idea, sincerely, for several reasons. The first, is that they are still building not only other island in terms of users, but other technological island. I think that there might be a better approach. And I hope that this point will help the discussion, that you find interesting some of the questions that I asked, and that we can continue the discussion in the afternoon and well after. Thank you.
Thanks, Federico. Yeah, you raised a lot of very valid, good points, and definitely a lot of questions that we'll need answers to later on in the afternoon. So, moving on to Orle's presentation.
No.
No, not really.
No.
I love the definition that you gave on Twitter about this talk. So you're not going to give